Hello, welcome to the Dance in Business conversation. My name is Leanne Mallory. I'm the founder and CEO of Leading in Motion, and we're going to be doing an interview today with Wren LaFeet. Just to give you a bit of context on the larger project, this project, currently the working title of our project is called the Corporate Dance Maven, and our intention here is really to support those who are dancers and teachers of dance to break into the corporate market and to do the difficult and rewarding work of teaching dance in the business context. So like I said, today we have Wren LaFeet here on the line with us, and he has been teaching dance since 2008 and developing his corporate work platform since about 2013. Wren, in his work, uses simple techniques from partner dance to help people be more present, connected, and mindful in their work. And he's also given a TED Talk entitled Pioneering the New Renaissance Through Movement. Welcome, Wren.
Thanks. Thank you, Leanne. Great to be here with you.
It's great to see you. I said a few things about you, but we'd love to hear you say a bit more about yourself. Anything you'd like us to know about your work and what you're up to in the world?
Yes, absolutely. So the key thing to know about what we're doing with our modality of co-crea and how we're bringing it into the corporate realm, it started actually back in high school for me in developing a way to move within a partnered context to different kinds of music. And at the same time that I was discovering swing dancing and playing with that to different styles of music, I was also discovering meditation. So there's been this kind of concurrent journey for me with presence and mindfulness and movement from a very early age. And so what co-crea is really working with is that synthesis of presence, mindfulness, and this structured movement that also leaves room for creativity with all different kinds of music. So it's been this incredible convergence of parallel paths throughout my career. And that's really where it works so well coming into a corporate setting, as the mindfulness movement just continues to build momentum within consciousness and within culture. We see this amazing opportunity to create these different syntheses of modalities and of practices. So that's the real crux of what I want people to understand about this work is it's a mindfulness practice as much as it is an embodiment practice, and really looking at how those two things are pretty much the same in my practice and my understanding, my emergent understanding of it. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And in that, I'm actually really curious. How would you describe then what are the benefits that folks get from doing the work? And let's say particularly in the business context.
So this is a place where the organization that my partner and I are working with now and have been working with since December, Awake at Work, they really have all of the stats and all of the context for the benefits really well illuminated on the new website that just launched a couple weeks ago.
Nice.
But we're seeing really spectacular increases in people's ability to focus on the task at hand, people's ability to relax at work, people's ability to find flow in their workspace and increased creativity. People are experiencing incredible shrinkages in the amount of time it takes them to actually complete projects. People are noticing and experiencing noticeable amounts of increased connectivity in their relationships, not only at work, but in their daily lives. And that's the mindfulness portion. That's the 9-week program that Awake at Work has been developing. And as we come in and start to bring more of the embodied practices and the embodied dance practices into this work, I expect that we'll see even more increases in the connectivity piece, the emotional intelligence piece, the soft skills piece, the overall ability to sense what's happening in the body as we're interacting with stressful situations, because that really the concept of the biofeedback loop that the connectivity in the dance starts to create between people it just increases, it sends that sensitivity of what's happening in the body through the roof in a really good way. We start to be able to manage our triggers in those challenging emotional situations, because we're able to understand what the feeling is and where it's coming from on a somatic level. So that's what I would say about that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the things that I get asked a lot, and this is really part of, I think, our intention with this project, is how did you get started? So I understand from what you said earlier that you've been developing this work since 2013, that your first, real corporate gig or contract, if you will, has happened much more recently. And I know that you've come through Awake at Work as kind of a collaborative partnership. Tell us kind of how you got, if you will, in the door, and how that collaboration came to be.
Oh, it's such a great story. And it's in a totally non-traditional word. Magic is the word that I would use. I became interested in using dance in a corporate context, kind of as a meditation, and just asking the question, where can I be of the greatest service with this work? And that's been, since 2011, has been my inquiry. The TED Talk was a huge push into that contemplation of, oh, people are interested in this. This isn't just me and my artistic, creative persona wanting to put this out into the world. This is something that people are interested in. And so after the TED Talk, the being in that kind of that milieu of other professionals coming in, and one person, Eric Plantenberg from Freedom Personal Development, who is based out in Bend, he was giving his TED Talk at the time, and I saw what he was doing with his abundant living retreats, inviting people in the business world in to come into really deep presence and really getting people to do things that is seriously out of their comfort zone. And so in 2013, it first came to me, it's like, well, what if we were dancing in the business world? What if we were bringing this to these places where there is so much stress, where there is so much competition and contention and hierarchy and the need to, succeed over, and what the dance does is put people into a place of cooperation in order to succeed. The dance just absolutely will not tolerate any kind of competition. And so, long story short, I got in touch with my one of my associates who works in film down in California, and asked him, who's doing this kind of mindfulness work in corporations where after many iterations of being like, yes, going into corporations, oh, this isn't going to work, we don't know the people, wait, but no, we can totally figure it out, and the timing is wrong. Like, I finally was just like in my fourth trial of like, okay, how can I make this happen? He told me to get in touch with Annika Komen, who had been working for Intel and developed this program called Awake at Intel. And I got really excited, and I sent her an email, and I never heard back. And then it just so happened that I knew that my friends at Wonderland here in Portland, which is a contemplative arts and tea kind of community house, I knew that they had some contacts at Intel. And so I asked them, hey, maybe you can set me up with your contacts at Intel. They said, yeah, sure. And so nothing happened. And then many months later, I kind of poked them again, like, hey, what about those people you know? And they're like, oh, yeah, right. And then about 2 weeks later, I got an email from Annika Komen saying, hey, do you want to come and teach dance at our team retreats? And I said, yes. And that was kind of it. We joined the team after that.
You are highlighting one of the things that I've also seen so much as I do this work, which is that the first email, the second email, sometimes the third email or phone call, it's like, one of the things that one of my mentors says is, it's not personal. It's not that they don't want to talk to you. They're in the corporate world. They're busy. They've got a lot on their plates, and they don't even have a clue who you are. So that willingness to be persistent, to come back in, to ask again, and to keep believing in yourself, and not take that as, oh, therefore then my idea is not a good one, or this work isn't actually wanted or needed. And just
Absolutely.
coming back and making that same request again.
Yeah, patience, persistence, and compassion with self too. Compassion with self to say, it's okay, I'm not worthless. They don't think I'm full of it. They're just in their life doing their thing. What's really funny is Annika and I actually sat in the same room together at the beginning of 2012. And when she contacted me, she told me, she's like, I remember you sitting in this room at Wonderland. I did not remember her, so that's funny.
So you made an impression then.
Clearly.
And continue to do so, it sounds like. Wren, tell me a little bit about what's unique about partner dance in particular when it comes to doing work in business. Like, what's the secret sauce, if you will, that inviting people to partner through their bodies is giving these folks that they're not getting anywhere else?
Wow. I could talk for a very long time about that. I think that the thing that most comes to mind is the presence, the immediacy that is required of both people to be with whatever is happening in the moment. The way that we teach, there's no set steps. Excuse me. In most traditional partner dances like waltz or swing or salsa, you have a basic step that's happening in time with the music, which is a set traditional music for that dance. Therefore, you kind of know what to expect. There's a certain set of movements that are the vocabulary that are laid on top of that foundation. The way that we teach, we use a very simple basic step, which we're borrowing from blues dancing, largely, what is the modern vernacular blues dancing. I need to be really conscious of culturally appropriative language. It's a very big conversation in the dance world. So we're borrowing it from the blues vernacular dances. And it's a very simple step over which we can layer any kind of movement or expression that we want. Now, there's a lot of techniques that help us to keep ourselves safe, keep our bodies safe. But what is the most important thing is listening and responding in the moment to our partner, to the music, and to what's happening in our own bodies. So how that translates into a business context, you come into a boardroom, you come into a meeting, you come in, you sit down at your desk. What's the first thing you do? Is it you open your mouth and talk without paying attention to what else is happening in the room? Do you just launch into a presentation without like taking a scan of the general feeling of the room? Do you start just like launching into your emails, open your computer and go before like listening to your own body and like, okay, what's really alive for me right now? What do I feel like I would be most effective interfacing with, in the case of our computer, like my partner here, my computer is my partner. It's like, okay, how am I? It's like there's not a lot that you receive back from a computer, but you can still check in with yourself and listen. How do I want to be interacting in this situation? And so when we're training with partner dance, there's a lot going on all the time, and we need to be listening and responding at the same time. We're not verbalizing anything. It's all happening in the body. So when we're in conversation with a person, we need to learn how to slow that down and translate that listening and responding into that verbal context in which we're not talking as we're listening, and we're not formulating thoughts as we're listening to another person, but we're just doing one or the other. So it provides a somatic release, actually, for like all of that energy. It creates endorphins, it creates oxytocin, right? And it creates all those happy chemicals like dopamine and serotonin that are going to bring our mood into a really calm and relaxed state. And then from there, we can actually start to listen in a little bit deeper without all of that cortisol and stress chemicals running in our body.
Totally. Well, those are at least two, maybe more than that. I'm losing count, but at least two things. The listening just blows my mind, having worked with corporate leaders for a long time. The capacity to not just do, but to do the right thing that's really required in the moment by the situation, because I'm present enough to be paying attention, is huge and would solve a lot of problems, I think, that we're facing in the world. So thank you for doing this work.
Yes.
And thank you for doing the hard work to justify it. In other words, you said a lot, and I think maybe many of the folks will be listening, if they're folks who are like us, who teach dance, who do this work, will get it. How do you maybe give me a sentence or two? Like, what are some of the really simple things you say to business leaders that are like the nuggets or the relevancy building phrases that you kind of use again and again that you find like really land with people when you say, this is what you're getting, or this is why we're doing this, that you say in how you're teaching?
I think really citing the neurobiology that's happening is one of the key pieces with Awake at Work, and that we kind of really met up on with them through the work of developing Co-Crea, is when we put ourselves into a state of relaxation through meditation, there is an autonomic response that happens in other people, in which those mirror neurons, which is an absolutely amazing discovery. Thank you, science, for that. We activate that same state in other people. So if people are in that crazy stress state, if we can just drop in and be like, okay, I'm going to be here, it actually has an effect on other people that is noticeable when we hook people's brains up to scanners. And so I think that is one piece that is really important to convey to businesses and to leaders who are curious about this work but maybe have their doubts. The other piece is the relational piece. That I think is so important right now. We're seeing a huge shift in corporate cultures as millennials are coming into the workforce. It's been estimated that by the year 2026 or something really soon, about 70% of the workforce is going to be millennials. And our generation is really, really all about personal development, all about learning, all about growth. And the fastest way to do that is through our relationships. It's been seen again and again and again that when we really work on ourselves and work on our relationships, then both of those things increase exponentially, and we're able to actually be more effective at work. When we're not fighting and in stress response all the time in the work environment, more gets done.
Totally.
It's a pretty simple equation. So those are the two things that I would say: the relational intelligence and the mirror neuron, the neurobiology of change, how those relate.
You also touched on something which I get a lot of questions about as well, which is kind of like the business case for this work. So if you think about, and I know that you're kind of on the beginning edge of how often, let's say, you're selling it or you're going into a new company and you're making a case for this, but you mentioned millennials and relationships. I can imagine that's an interesting business case. What do you see? What already have you seen, or what do you imagine you're going to see as you start to go to new companies and say, hey, I think you should be bringing dance into the workplace? What are some of the aspects of the business case, or how do you imagine yourself really selling the work?
That's a really good question. And that is definitely a development edge for me. That's a growth edge for me. As someone who's really steeped in the arts, business always confuses me a little bit.
Thank you, because you're not the only one of us who are thinking that.
Yeah. And because it's constantly shifting and it's constantly changing, like, as I said, right now, like, the whole business world is having to kind of readjust. And there's this interesting transition happening right now that is hard to predict, and it's hard to say like what worked last week or last month, you know, is going to work any time down the road. And so I'm in a very interesting learning curve in which I'm learning what has worked in a way, at the same time as I'm developing new business practices. There was a great talk at Design for Dance last year by John Michael Shart, who talked about emergent leadership and emergent, just like the quality of emergence in business, in organizations. And I think that as somatics starts to gain much more of a foothold and much more visibility, viability, and validity within the greater context of just our humanity, then business will start to check that out and come on board. And really, they already are. I mean, Awake at Work is not the only business that's bringing mindfulness into the workplace. I think we are the only business that's really focusing on genius. And I think that right there is like, as we're talking about mindfulness, as we're talking about bringing dance into the workplace, there's this amazing quality of creating or inviting out our inherent genius. And it's not to say like our genius, like, oh, that person is a genius, right? Oh, Mozart, he's a genius. No, everyone has genius. Everyone has a latent genius inside of them that has yet to be discovered, or maybe is just starting to peek through the surface. And it's that, drawing on that and calling forth that from each individual employee in an organization and placing them in a position to actually enact that genius and bring it forth, that's going to enable business to succeed at a higher level, and, you know, higher level, whatever that means to you. But it seems to me that that's really kind of the next phase, is not just treating employees as workers in a big machine that is like, oh, this is the task, this is the position, this is what you need to do. Oh, you're qualified for that, go do it. But rather looking at the person's qualifications and being like, oh, how would you actually best serve this organization? Okay, cool. Well, we have this position that needs being filled, but you're pretty like specialized, and actually we could create a whole new position for you, in which maybe we could eliminate some other ones, and those people would discover their genius and like come up over here. And so, you know, it's I think it's really like it's opening the field up for a lot of reorganization and reimagining what business structure can look like.
So you're disrupting things.
Did I say that? I didn't say that.
I said that.
I think there is a place for disruptive technology. I mean, we've definitely seen how that kind of innovation has actually improved things. At first, it's really uncomfortable. We're not used to change. We don't like change. We're humans. We like our creature comforts. I've got my, you know, it's all this goes over here. And, but when we really see what that kind of disruptive technology or disruptive innovation can produce and create in culture and in society, eventually people jump on board with it. You know, look at the iPhone, look at the smartphone. Totally. I resisted that for years. And then finally I was like, oh, wait a minute, I could do my emails on the bus. I didn't have a car at the time. I'm going to get a smartphone.
It's funny because I'm not an early adopter when it comes to tech, but I certainly am when it comes to these kinds of technologies, right? And disruption is kind of an interesting and edgy word. What actually struck me in what you said, and I was being a little provocative, but I also think about my work as unlocking things in people, right? And so when we move in these different ways, or we are out, the parts of ourselves that don't get used as much in the business world start to get to come out, then we get to see, wow, this is actually who this person really is. And maybe I was making use of that, or maybe they didn't know that was what they really had to bring to bear on the questions that we're facing in the workplace. So I totally agree with you that creating the context or the possibility for more of that does change things in business, and maybe it's also disruptive, and maybe there's a fear there, or maybe that's a good thing.
Well, one of my favorite quotes that I've virtually lived my life by for the last 3 or 4 years comes from Tony Robbins, which is, your enjoyment of life is directly proportional to the amount of uncertainty that you can comfortably handle.
Love it.
Love it, right? And it's like, okay, now how do we translate that into a business philosophy?
We teach improvisational dance and give people a chance to feel what it's like to have to do that in the moment.
You took the words out of my mouth.
Whoa. This is why I like you, Wren. I have a couple of concrete questions, and I wonder if you'd be willing to do this. So we get into here, and it's exciting, and it's intellectual, and it's, it's mind blowing, and then people are like, but okay, what does it look like? So you've got an hour. If you're open to it, would you give us just like a couple examples of what you might actually do with people, and keep it short, kind of high level, but what do you do with people if you have them for an hour in a business context? Speaking to those of us who teach dance, give us a couple of examples of what an activity might look like even.
So one activity that we routinely run as just a basis, basically our work follows a 5-step process of connection. We connect to ourselves, we connect to the ground, we connect to the music or inspiration, and then we connect to another person.
Nice.
And then we connect to the whole or the organization. So it's about, once we've established a connection with another person, realizing that we're operating in a larger sphere. And there's all these other couples dancing around us that we have to be aware of, or we're just going to smash right into them all over the place. We have to learn how that synergistic field, and it's dynamic and shifting all the time. We have to learn how to navigate within that. So the first exercise that we might run is from my theater training within the Suzuki method, which is a Japanese form of martial theater training. And it's really simple. It's just about feeling the undersides of your feet or any body part heavy into the ground. And so we center ourselves in our low center, down just beneath our belly button, and just feel our feet on the ground. It's very simple and kind of like, just feel my feet on the ground. But if you think about it and you do it right now, you just feel your feet on the floor. What happens to your body when you just feel your feet on the floor?
Relax.
That. Exactly. So it's a very simple practice that we can bring into just about any moment in our lives. We're at the computer stressing out. Oh my God, I got deadlines. I'm just going to take a breath and I'm just going to feel my feet on the floor. Okay. What do I need to do? I'll look at my to-do list. That thing feels the most alive right now. If I can get that done today, I'll be good. And that's one practice that we bring in. And from there, we get people interacting in that way of encouraging people to assist in helping people feel their feet on the floor, and just giving people light pushes from side to side. I'm going to push you on your shoulders. Feel how grounded you are. Can you stay, rooted like a tree? Can you stay in that place? And maybe you sway, but you're not getting pushed off of your center. From there, we'll move into some movement practices to develop rhythm. So we're connecting to the earth and to the music in that way, where we're starting to move through the space. And we're also starting to connect on the relational level. As we pass people by, we're starting to make eye contact. We're starting to feel how making eye contact with different people makes us feel. And we're starting to navigate the whole system. We're starting to see the spaces and where we can actually go to create a more dynamic, fluid, and fun environment to work within. And from there, we move into connection. We'd start to explore the frame of the social partner dance context. And we also talk about consent. So that's another huge piece that's really important to bring into a workplace, so we're not having to battle these social mores that get us into trouble, like harassment and we talk about patriarchy. We talk a little bit about, we don't go so far into power and privilege, but it is challenging to talk about consent without addressing those things. And that can get a little edgy in a business context, but it's really important. And so we'll just talk about saying yes, saying no, how that feels to be said no to, and not to take things personally. And after we get through that, we move into framework, We move into the idea of tone, which is just feeling pressure in the body and how that is a signifier of change, and developing that deeper listening and responding. And then we start to move around the room together. We might experience turning through space with one another. And really that's about what we get to in an hour. So we start to play with these spaces where the improvisation and where the uncertainty might take place. And we learn how to respond in appropriate ways that aren't reactive and aren't unnatural. So doing things to our body that might not feel good.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
And so you gave us a sense of what an hour might look like. In the context of your typical, at this point, engagement with a company, how many hours or how many of those sessions would you typically be doing with a particular group of people?
So I will say that particular hour, we have actually not gotten a chance to do going into a business setting yet. We've done that with a number of retreats and groups that are made up of business people. And that's been met with great enthusiasm. We've had a lot of incredible experiences with that. So like conferences, retreats, open enrollment type environments in which people are coming in and not necessarily knowing entirely what they're going to get, but then we get to dance and it's like amazing. So my desire would be to be able to run stuff like this throughout an ongoing program engagement, so that we're working with pieces of these embodiment practices throughout a longer session of engagement or a series of engagements. So like in the Awake at Work 9-week session, there might be one or two of these embodiment pieces every session that happens once monthly for 9 months.
So it might be
for 9 weeks.
Nine or once a week, once a month, 9-month program where there's more content than what you're doing, but you're the person who's coming in and doing the embodiment piece of each of those segments.
Right. And I'll just clarify, the 9-week program is the flagship offering of Awake at Work. And so there's already a very well-established, incredibly crafted 9-week program in which there's an hour and a half each week, in which a series of dyads and mindfulness meditations takes place. And there's certain sessions within that 9-week program that deal with relational intelligence and embodiment practices that our work is going to fit really nicely into. And we're still in the process of integrating and developing that, and how that's going to really enhance what's already existent.
Yeah, I really love your example. And a lot of folks I talk to are like, how do I do this? And they kind of envision themselves going in and offering their own workshop. And the benefit of the possible collaboration with an intact program is that you just get to come in and do the piece that you love, right? It complements and deepens what they're already up to. So I really appreciate having a beautiful example of, I'm not just trying to go in and do this or sell this myself, but rather I'm becoming part of a larger leadership development or mindfulness program that can really benefit from the embodiment pieces that I'm bringing. I think it's a really nice way for us to enter the business context.
Absolutely, because it's a little bit goes such a long way, especially with people who might not be used to working with their bodies in this way, might not even be comfortable with working with their bodies in this way. Just little homeopathic drops, I think, go a really, really long ways into helping people start to open up and get access to their body, because there's a lot of layering that happens in our lives. There's a lot of trauma, and we have to be really sensitive to that. You don't want to just throw people into, now dance with this other person,
for 3 hours.
Like, we'll dance with this other person. Like, dance with a person? I have a problem even like interacting with that person over there.
I don't even like that person.
I don't even like that person. They blew me off for a coffee meeting, like.
And by the way, I have to see them tomorrow, so if I dance with them today, that could be awkward.
Right, and it could also be incredibly nurturing and like provide that opportunity to actually have a dialogue with that person and clear it and be like, oh wow, okay, cool. Now we can be humans again.
Totally. One of the things I often find myself saying about the benefits of doing embodied or somatic work in this context is that rather than get information about what we should do and then have to go after the training and figure out how to do it, we actually have the breakthrough real time. Like if you have a better connection with the person because you've danced together, it continues to exist. Like you've made it through the wall, but if you just told to have a better connection with that person, you'd have to go figure out how to do later on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And it just, I mean, and once again, just bringing the presence into the space of it's important to engender trust within this work. It's just so important. That's the other piece that comes through is being able to actually trust people. And trust isn't given, it's earned. And this is an opportunity to really earn that trust, to learn how to move with impeccability with another person without trespassing boundaries. Like, that's huge. That's huge, to be able to work in an environment in which we're not in competition with one another and always looking for the angle, but instead, oh, right, we're collaborators. Like we just danced together, and it really does do something to the neurobiology that is quite incredible.
Totally. I have one more technical question, and it's a little more on the edgy side, but it's really one of the things that I think is important for this moment of bringing dance to the workplace, which is actually about your value and money and how you charge. So I'll put myself on the line first, and then I'll give you a chance to say whatever you want about this. But what I've found, for example, let me say two things. One, part of why I'm interested in this work is because I think there are a lot of us with incredible skills in somatics and dance and some of these things that we're getting paid peanuts for what we're doing if we're just teaching folks who are like us and who are outside of those spaces. When we come into the corporate space, then it's like, I don't even know how to get my head around what I would say that the value of my work is, how much I would charge. I don't even know what the numbers look like. So for me, it's like, wow, I used to teach this for $50 an hour. Then it was 500 and now it's 5,000 for half a day. How do you think about how you express your value or how you put forward a request to be paid for what you do in that context? And how is it different than how you used to think about it when you were simply teaching dance to people off the street?
I'm still figuring it out. And I know that like my pricing that I've set for myself is very different from the pricing that is set through Awake at Work, who was started by a person working in corporate and for a very long time. And so her pricing is based on that established presence within that world. And as I come in as a pretty much a private contractor through Awake at Work, my value shifts up. So I'm right now for this work, I'm looking at about 250 an hour, right? And with more, that's just for coming in to do like introductory sessions, in which might include a number of different practices. And for the 9-week program, it's very different. There's a higher rate there. So, yeah.
Thanks for being willing to talk about that. I know that for those of us in the dance world who've maybe made choices to serve the masses or to make our work available to those who couldn't afford it, it's a whole kind of mindset shift, in fact. And it's edgy to talk about money. It's edgy to talk about how we're paid, edgy to tell each other how we're paid, and also kind of part of the black box that is, what would it be to do corporate work? Like, I can't even imagine what's in there sometimes. So I think it's part of why I ask, and I appreciate your willingness to.
Yeah, it's definitely edgy to talk about. A whole bunch of stuff comes up, all these fears come up, and like, oh my God, am I really worth that? Like, I'm telling all these people, but man, the vulnerability piece it's huge, because we're opening ourselves up and allowing people to see parts of ourselves that, we don't always let everybody see. But if we open it up and put it out there in the world, we're allowing that that fear to kind of diminish.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll add, I want to live in a world where, I don't know, where there's actually more equality in terms of the thing, like the various gifts that we have are valued at full value and are paid in similar ways. And to have spent my life kind of wearing two different hats of like the corporate work and then the dance communities, and seeing the difference in access and people can pay for because what they can charge for what they do, and the value that we place on different kinds of art in our society. It's really kind of mind-boggling, the level of discrepancies that there are, and how gifted some of the people that I've studied with have been, and maybe have had trouble paying their bills or whatever. So it's part of my mission as well, I think, to just open the conversation so that we can at least ask the question, if I've spent 30 years, 10 years, 5 years, but 30 and 40 years, and the people that I've worked with, right, cultivating these embodied skills, how do I see them as something that I can actually be paid for, so that I can do bigger work in the world and bring my message forward more fully?
Yeah, I think it's moving into a space of valuing people. Like, how do we value people? People, not skills, right? Oh, this person has that skill, that's worth X amount. Yeah, but what are all of the experiences that person has that are coming with that skill, right? Like, you might have a certain skill, but you don't actually have the emotional intelligence to back that skill up in practice. And emotional intelligence is another skill itself. So I think it's just coming into a new conception of how we're actually valuing people. And that's a whole new paradigm of within business that I think.
Totally. And if I speak to that, I think the folks who are in the corporate world have to make those choices within themselves about themselves as well. So do I value this part of who I am more than that part of who I am? And the artist part, or the part that's more emotional versus the part that gets things done. And, I see so many people making internal compartmentalization choices about where the value is placed. And as we see business culture changing and that getting opened up in different ways, and more value being placed on the human side of things and all of this, it's like we can be more whole, I think, in the context of that as individuals and perhaps as a society as well.
Well, we're getting into a whole big old can of worms.
We'll pause there. I think it's a good place to move towards wrapping up. And thank you so much for your time. I'd love to hear just like a, in summary, or perhaps if you could say one thing or offer one piece of advice to folks who really want to do this work, what would you say?
I guess maybe two things. Listen to music you don't understand and dance to it. Go to Pandora and just like go into a genre of music and a channel that you've never really listened to, put it on and just put yourself in the middle of the living room and just like start moving to it. It's okay if it's confusing as hell. See what happens, would be the first thing I would say. The other thing I would say is get in touch with yourself. Literally, like, oh, I'm just going to like play with pressing on my shoulder muscles. Am I sore? Am I tense? What happens if I put my hand on my shoulder and just start rotating my shoulder around? Interesting. And just like be in the curiosity with the body, be in the fascination of the body, because these are really miraculous instruments that we have. We really are quite incredible as machines, as animals, as just life. And the more that we can, I've found that the more that I'm in curiosity and wonder with my body, even the places where it hurts and there's pain, and going, oh, why does that hurt? I do not remember doing anything to that it should be hurting right now, and then like maybe put a hand there and be like, oh, lower back, you're really crunchy today. Fascinating. Like, I'm just going to move that around a little bit, and start to really be curious, because the more in touch and in tune with our own bodies we are, the easier it gets to be curious in a platonic and strictly kind of forensic way about another person's body when we come into contact with it. So it doesn't have this charge of sexuality, of It's even edgy saying that word in this context, right? It doesn't have that charge there, though. It's just like, oh, another body, another machine. Interesting. It's built pretty much the same as mine, with all kinds of quirks and idiosyncrasies that I don't know about. What happens if they move together? So curiosity really feels like the theme there. Be in that space. Dance to music you don't understand, and be fascinated by things you don't understand about your body, and literally get in touch with them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so excited that we had a chance to do this.
Yeah.
Let me just say a couple words for our audience. If you want to continue to follow us, we're going to be doing a few more interviews. We're hopefully going to be running a course on teaching dance in business. You can soon track us down at the Corporate Dance Maven on Facebook, and also corporatedancemaven.com. And Wren, tell us where we can find more about your work specifically.
So right now, dancecocrea.com. That's DANCECOCREA.com is for the dance work specifically. If you'd like to learn more about mindfulness and how how we're integrating with that work in the workplace, check out awakeatworkinstitute.com.
Beautiful, thank you. And you can find more about my work, Leanne Mallory, Leading in Motion, and it's leadinginmotion.com. We'll talk to you all soon.